Well, he was born in Glasgow, Montana, raised in Butte, eventually graduated high school in Bozeman. Now he's on the short list of Americans that Vladimir Putin is hoping the Russians get a chance to question. Aaron Flint here with Montana Talks as we take you statewide from Glendive to Kalispell. Very pleased to be joined this morning by Ambassador Michael McFaul. He's going to join us, I believe, for the full hour, or at least most of the hour. I know he was getting some interview requests across the country over the weekend. But either way, joining us today on Montana Talks, of course, Ambassador McFaul served as President Barack Obama's ambassador to Russia from 2012 to 2014. Now back in Montana and joining us here on Montana Talks. Ambassador, great to have you on the show and great to chat with you again. It's been a couple of years, I think, since we last caught up.
It has. Thanks for having me back.
First off, you've got a book out now, your new book that's out, From Cold War to Hot Peace. You did a book signing in Bozeman yesterday. I saw some pictures. It looked like the only way you could fit more people at that bookstore in Bozeman was if they rappelled in through the rafters or something.
That's right. I think they had over 500 people show up.
Wow.
It was a fantastic crowd. We didn't have enough books to sell there, but as you said, it's still available all over the place, and it was great to be back in Bozeman to talk about my book.
Yeah, you graduated high school there. One of your classmates, or at least one of your debate partners back then, was now Republican Senator Steve Daines, and of course, yep. you were nominated to be ambassador by and also served at the White House with Democrat President Barack Obama. So interesting to see two Montanans, different sides of the aisle, but in two very senior positions there.
Yeah, different sides of the aisle, kind of abstractly about domestic things. But one thing I want to remind all your listeners, when it comes to American national security, there's no such thing as Democrat security or Republican security. And I was glad to talk to Senator Daines this week after this ordeal of being put on this list. He called me, and I was very gracious of him. So did Senator Tester, by the way, as well as many other Republican and Democratic senators. And as somebody who's not, when it comes to national security, they're not very partisan issues, to be honest. They're about America. And what was great about the drama that me and my other 11 colleagues, Democrats and Republicans, had to go through after Putin named us on that list, basically alleging we were criminals, just so people understand, that committed crimes within Russia. The country rallied to our cause, and we got a 98-0 vote in the Senate supporting us and defending us. So every now and then we can come together, and on national security issues, I think it's imperative that we come together.
Yeah, well, and I know, when I was overseas with the military, we didn't ask people, are you Democrat, you Republican, you liberal or conservative?
Right.
We all were wearing the same uniform with the same flag on the shoulder. Well, one of the questions that I have is, because I remember talking with you back in 2014, and I remember you just talking about just how much you were being harassed by the Russian regime, and which I guess it shouldn't be tolerated for a sitting ambassador, but it happened nonetheless. But I guess I can understand why it would have happened when you were the actual ambassador. But why now? You've been out of that post for 2 years. We got to take a quick break here on Montana Talks, and then we'll get back into our discussion here with Ambassador Michael McFaul joining us as he's back in Montana. So, say, Ambassador McFaul, I just got word. Are you just available for a couple more minutes? Or
That's right. Yeah, I got to jump on another TV interview for one of my employers, so I'm going to have to go right after this.
Oh, okay. All right. I apologize. All right. Well, we'll have to get you on for a longer amount of time because I wanted to get your thoughts on a few different issues. I originally thought we'd have you for at least most of the hour this morning.
I apologize. So. It's a busy time for me right now. Yeah.
All right. Well, maybe then I'll just advance. Well, first, real quickly, why do you think you're still being targeted by Putin and the Russians, even 2 years after you left your post as ambassador?
Well, I think it's because I speak out against Vladimir Putin. I understand how his regime operates. I understand the kind of oppression that he does within his society. I understand how outrageous it is that he annexed Crimea and started a war in eastern Ukraine, that he supports one of the worst dictators in the world in Syria, and that he orchestrated a military intervention using his military intelligence officers in the 2016 presidential elections here in America. And so he wants to intimidate me. He wants to scare me, just like he does all of his political opponents. And this latest thing was just a new installment in that. And the whole reason I wrote the book, by the way, was to try to educate the American people about the nature of this regime, because you're absolutely right. We did talk about the level of harassment that I had to endure as an ambassador, particularly in regarding disinformation, where they just spewed all kinds of lies about me. The claim that I was sent by the United States to foment revolution against Putin, which is categorically false, but that was out there all the time. And even some really sinister things even worse sinister things from time to time, including, one of the lowest moments when I was ambassador, when some Russian group, and again, I can't say it was Putin, but put out a video that accused me of being a pedophile.
Wow.
And so that's what they do. And I hope the American people, the Trump administration, and our president will begin to understand, the really dangerous nature of the Putin regime.
Well, Ambassador, I know you've got to run because you've got a TV interview to run to, but I did want to, if you can, real quick, I wanted to get your thoughts, though, because the thought, at least my thought back here, and thought I'm hearing from a lot of folks, is that, you talk about the harassment that came upon you as you were ambassador to the U.S. You just mentioned Crimea, you just mentioned Ukraine, you just mentioned election meddling. We could talk about the continued shelter of NSA leaker Edwards. All of these things happened under the Obama administration. I just feel like there's this newfound anger from folks about Russia that they're trying to hold Donald Trump to account for the things that they would not hold Barack Obama and his administration to account for. What's your thoughts?
Well, a lot of those things happened under Barack Obama. That's a great point. And Edward Snowden, as you just mentioned, he came to Moscow while I was ambassador. Guy really ruined my summer, let me tell you.
I'll bet.
But let's be clear. What the Obama administration's response to Crimea was to put sanctions on Putin and to say this is outrageous. We fought World War II triggered by annexation. We can't go back to allowing that to happen. And President Trump, rather than doubling down on that, says, well, maybe we should look into recognizing Crimea as part of Russia. I think that's the wrong strategy. He continues to deny, he just did yesterday again, that the Russians attacked us in 2016. And I just don't understand it. And I know a lot of people in the Trump administration. I'll be in Washington tomorrow seeing several people at the White House, State Department, other places. And your listeners should know that nobody disagrees with my analysis of Russia. I actually think the Trump administration's policy towards Russia is pretty good, and in many ways better than the Obama administration. Now, I'm saying that as a former Obama administration official. They provided lethal assistance to the Ukrainians, for instance.
Yeah, something the Obama administration didn't do. I mean, that's one example of the Trump administration being stronger against Russia than the Obama administration.
Well, the Trump administration, yes, but President Trump, no. What he said in Helsinki, I was there in Helsinki listening to it. For some reason, he doesn't want to push back on Russia vis-a-vis Ukraine. He doesn't want to acknowledge what they did in 2016. And he stood right next to President Putin. He had a softball question. He could have knocked it out of the park. And instead he said, well, I'm not so sure who's right and wrong here. And President Putin just said these very strong things that's denying it. And I just think he needs to be tougher. It's okay to engage with Putin. Ronald Reagan engaged with the Soviets. So did a lot of other presidents during the Cold War. It's not okay to be soft on the Russians. And when the president stood there and said, it's a great idea to have the Russian government accuse people like me of being a criminal, that is not a great idea. That is not in America's national interest. And I hope the next time that he meets with Putin, he'll push back on Putin. And I think he's got the people in the government to do it. The president himself just needs to join his own administration's policy.
Well, Ambassador McFaul, I know you probably got to run, but and I remember one of the things that stood out to me when we chatted with you back in 2014 was because we talked something about, well, why did the Russians go after you the moment you hit the ground as ambassador? Why were they targeting you? And you mentioned how Vladimir Putin wanted to run for president, but he needed an argument for why to become president, and he needed an enemy, and so he had to make the Russian people think that you were out to get him, that the U.S. was out to get him. And so I think is President Trump kind of countering this by not strengthening Putin, by giving him an easy out to say, oh, see, look, the Americans are just attacking me, and because that's how he strengthened himself, was by claiming that you were attacking him, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I understand the president's strategy, which is to kind of befriend him and say we're not out to get you. But I think I know Vladimir Putin a little bit better than President Trump. I've met him first in 1991. I've written about him. I've been in a half a dozen meetings with him. And appeasement and concessions is not going to work with Putin.
All right, Ambassador McFaul, we're out of time for this break. I appreciate it, but let's get you back on the show. All right, we'll have to.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, great.
And now here's a look at your latest news.